Greetings, welcome to the Elevate podcast with me, Dan Astin-Gregory. The battle for free speech rages on. In this episode, we take a blow-by-blow look at the latest developments within the ongoing battle for free speech following the recent demonetization of various dissenting groups by PayPal. We've seen the latest news that they accidentally inserted a new terms into their terms and conditions, which could result in financial penalties for those spreading misinformation. We'll be talking about the PayPal recent censorship, the misinformation U-turn, the potential for Musk's intervention with Twitter, with the deal potentially being back on. What does that mean for free speech? We'll talk about the Julian Assange protest this weekend as part of our wrap-up of all of the latest changes that are happening in the world around us. Challenges rather in the world around us when it comes to the battle for free speech. So next time you're clicking through one of those impossibly long and complicated legal documents or disclaimers when you agree to a company's terms and conditions or their terms of service, perhaps it will pay for us all to pay a little bit more of a closer attention to what exactly we are signing up to. Do you think it's right that a private company gets to decide that they can take your money if you say something they disagree with? Well, maybe this is the case if we're not paying close enough attention. A new policy in PayPal's fine print triggered a storm of outrage over apparent plans to impose, starting on the 3rd of November, a hefty fine of $2,500 anytime one of its 429 million consumers and merchants express what the corporate giant deems to be misinformation. Now, fortunately, the online response to this stiff fine was met with an intense pushback. Now, put this in no uncertain terms, PayPal is a little bit on the rocks already with its share price having halved this year. And since this announcement, it's taken a further tumble. Yet PayPal quickly apologized over the weekend for what it called confusion, claiming that it was all just an error. But this apology and backtrack didn't come before a deluge of criticism from a number of high-profile individuals, including former executive Elon Musk and PayPal's own former president, David Marcus. Now, all of this comes following the recent demonetization of dissenting voices by PayPal. Our recent podcast guest, Toby Young, on the 15th of September, who is the Free Speech Union's General Secretary, was notified by PayPal that all of his PayPal accounts would be closed. That includes his personal account, his Free Speech Union account, and the account of the Daily Skeptic, the publication that he runs. Now, the reasons cited in all three cases were that the accounts had violated PayPal's acceptable use policy. Now, Toby was suspicious that someone at PayPal simply didn't like his politics, and they had removed his accounts for these reasons without bothering to create a proper alibi. Well, perhaps they thought they didn't need one. Many organizations before them had gone quietly into the night, having received their marching orders from the financial giant, and expected perhaps that, just like many others, Toby and his various companies would do the same. However, after the news, as we heard on the recent interview with Toby, that the Free Speech Union's demonetization had occurred, he took to the news himself. He went to GB News, he went on to The Spectator, Spike, Telegraph, undertook various podcast interviews, including here on the Elevate podcast, and encouraged his social media followers to boycott the company and to make guest appearances, and went on to make guest appearances on various different TV shows, including GB News, Sky, etc. The story then quickly gained traction across the mainstream media and across the British press, and PayPal's actions were roughly condemned. Now, thousands of people simultaneously took to social media, calling to boycott PayPal and to close their accounts in solidarity with those who have been affected. So the pushback across media was ferocious, but the political pushback was intense as well. And according to the Sunday Express, politicians reacted with fury to PayPal's actions, with one conservative peer saying that she had never seen so much cross-party outrage. It seems the issue struck a chord. Now, as we mentioned in the previous episode, Danny Kruger MP took to the floor in the House of Commons to ask a question about PayPal's actions, and just as importantly, pointed out that the regulatory environment in which companies like PayPal presently operate must be scrutinized. Baroness Fox raised the issue on BBC One's Question Time, and Jacob Rees-Mogg also took action on this front, calling for further political and legal ramifications. The story also caught international attention when an American pro-free speech group, FIRE, strongly condemned PayPal's decision to deplatform the Free Speech Union, describing it as a threat to the culture of freedom of expression. Now, the controversy surrounding PayPal has subsequently amplified as tensions begin to run high over misinformation claims as America approaches its important midterm elections in the United States, where it's expected that Republicans could take control over both houses of the Congress. Now, we've quite clearly seen that PayPal has its own political leanings in recent months, despite its denial of such a case. But even taking this to one side, perhaps the political leanings of certain executives or the company itself, so much for big tech not interfering in elections. Quite clearly, if a major organization, whether it's a social media organization or a financial organization, starts to intervene in free speech and particularly counsels a particular political leaning, I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican or you're left or the right, you're the up, the down, the reds, the blues, it doesn't matter. But if one large company or several large companies conspire to close down the accounts of a certain political voice, then we truly do not have free and fair elections. So we must ask bigger questions, not only about the war on free speech, but the war on democracy itself. And free speech itself is a democratic foundation. So we should be concerned about what we're seeing right now. Many fearing that big tech is targeting people due to their political beliefs or views that go against the grand narratives that we're seeing. And due to the pressure, PayPal originally backtracked on their demonetization of the Free Speech Union, but it was too late. And now with this new idea of fining people for misinformation, we're reaching new grounds altogether. But PayPal came out and said that they're not fining people for misinformation, and this language was never intended to be inserted into the policy, according to a spokesperson, once the media had reached fever pitch once again, and they apologized for the confusion that this has caused. Well, do you buy into PayPal's claim that this was an innocent error that was promptly updated with the correct information, or is this a continuation of the recent attack on free speech? It's quite clear, whether accidental or not, whether it is under consideration or review. PayPal itself published a policy which indicates that it's not only been thinking about such a policy, but it put it to paper. And the reality is we cannot just allow this to happen and just move on. It's an egregious war on our free speech. And we need to start sending a strong message, not only to PayPal, but to Twitter and all the big tech platforms that have engaged in this assault on free speech. Let's look back over the last couple of years of how many doctors and scientists have been deplatformed and censored and had their content removed and later vindicated when the mainstream view matches the challenging initial assessments of what's happening in the world. And after all, what is misinformation? What is hate speech? These are not neutral categories. They're highly politicized terms used to describe speech which challenges ideas that the elites consider to be unacceptable or the dominant powers that be consider to be acceptable. We have already seen countless examples, as I mentioned, with dubious censorship across digital platforms such as YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We had our first YouTube account taken down after 5 million views. We've seen doctors and scientists deplatformed and censored across Twitter over recent months, including recently Dr. Peter McCullough, who had close to 500,000 followers. Well, what does it all mean? And in the news this week, in fact, just today, it appears that Elon Musk's deal with Twitter appears that it could be back on, having spent months and money trying to back out of the $44 billion deal. And there is now speculation that his own backers, his own financial backers, could be pulling out too. Even that has been labeled as misinformation by certain people covering the story. Irony. But billionaire Elon Musk is proposing to now proceed with his original offer to take Twitter private. However, the offer is contingent on the social media platform halting its legal proceedings, which they put in place to try and force the deal ahead. So whether Elon buys Twitter or not, let's say he does purchase Twitter. What does this all mean for the future of Twitter, the social media platform, and the wider space? Well, clearly the possibility of the takeover of social media giant Twitter has stirred some debate around the freedom of speech, thank goodness. Elon Musk appears to be a staunch supporter of freedom of speech and has been questioning the role of social media platforms in regulating the flow of information. Musk has previously, on many occasions, complained about Twitter's moderation of posts that it deems to be hateful or classified as disinformation or misinformation. But it remains unclear to this moment how the potential change of ownership may affect the day-to-day user experience. But one thing is for sure, Musk certainly has a different view on freedom of speech than its current owners. So maybe this is the beginning of the land turning the tide. Maybe this is a potential for a seismic shift at the top of the echelons of Silicon Valley, or maybe it's just a shot in the dark. Maybe this will come to nothing. But either way, no one can place all their hopes and dreams on one individual to maintain the baton of free speech. It's in all of our hands to take action, to stand up. The fact that Toby Young was able to mobilize so many people across social media and across the press to stand up shows what can be done when people come together to fight issues like this. But we stand at the dawn of a very dangerous time where the flow of information is increasingly controlled by fewer and fewer companies. And in order for free speech to prevail as a Western value in our culture, we each have to stand up for free speech. And on that point, many thousands this weekend took a stand, not just for freedom of speech, but to free Julian Assange. Hundreds, according to some outlets, protesters were joined outside the Palace of Westminster, more like several thousand, to demonstrate against the extradition of the WikiLeaks founder, Julian Assange. You'll see in the coming weeks that we're about to engage in a huge campaign to support the release of Julian Assange on the basis of standing up for freedom of speech and taking a stand against power. And the Australian activist is right now awaiting deportation from HMP Belmarsh, where he's currently incarcerated, where he fears he could face a prison sentence of a whopping 175 years. Julian Assange is now 51 years old. People are concerned about his health. It's come out in the news today that he's tested positive with COVID. I mean, these kind of stories only come out when, what a surprise. It's come out 2 days after the protest. People are fearing for his life, including his own wife. But he's wanted by the US authorities on 18 counts, including a spying charge for WikiLeaks release of confidential US military records and diplomatic insights. Ultimately, this is about WikiLeaks standing up against power and releasing information that is deemed to be in the public interest. And as we've witnessed for the last couple of years, it's very clear that the state, big corporations, are not often acting in our interests. So when someone like Julian Assange has the courage to release documents that are in the public interest, we must stand by his side and call for his release. As his wife this weekend was standing in London, accompanied by their 2 sons, applauded by the protesters who formed a human chain around Westminster Bridge along the front of Parliament and into Victoria Tower Gardens. The reality is, if Julian Assange is extradited, it would set forth fear amongst the media and other journalists of doing anything to expose the truth, because look what happened to Assange. It becomes a form of self-censorship. Journalists around the world will carry away from power, as they have done for the last couple of years, but now they'll have a reason to. They'll say, hang on, I'm not touching that. Look what happened to Julian Assange. We cannot allow Julian Assange to be extradited, and we cannot allow Julian Assange to be killed in jail and blamed on COVID. This is a very serious moment in our history. It's not just the war on free speech that we're witnessing from big tech. It's from big authorities like governments, like corporate institutions. We have to take a stand. So watch this space. There is a whole series of activities planned across the month of October to demand the release of Julian Assange. This weekend was just the beginning of something bigger. So watch this space. But we have to become empowered on taking on issues like this. Otherwise, what we've witnessed in the last couple of years with COVID, where there's been so many injustices, so much misinformation and disinformation from government sources, that we will never, ever get a semblance of the truth if free speech is allowed to be suppressed. So we have to take action. And finally, on COVID, Last week, to no fanfare whatsoever, the UK public inquiry began with Module 1. It's going to be a long-winded process over many months, and we're going to be scrutinizing exactly what's happened already on the podcast here. I nearly called it the Pandemic Podcast. We dropped the brand earlier in the year after 500 episodes covering everything that's happened in the pandemic. Maybe we'll bring it back for this purpose. But we want to take a deeper look at what really is going on with this public inquiry, and again, to ensure that we can make sure that truth prevails. So watch this space. I'll be going through a deep dive tomorrow on the latest developments. And then on Wednesday, we have our network call inside the Elevate Network. Once a month, we meet. We invite our community together to share updates on what's going on in the world and what we're doing within Elevate to try and make a difference. And this week, we're working on some major updates to our private platform. So if you haven't yet joined us inside the Elevate Network, it's an online community and platform. You can join us at weareelevate.org. We're making some important updates this week to make it even more engaging, to make it easy to make sense of what's going on in the world and share links. We'll be cataloging all of our library of content and our past events so you can get easy access to some of the great material, guest Q&As we've had in community sessions. So do watch this space and join us on Wednesday night where we'll take you through the latest developments. We'll take you on a walkthrough of the tour and the updates so you can see the new features. It's a really exciting time for us inside the Elevate Network. So I hope you'll join us at weareelevate.org and RSVP for our event on Wednesday night, where we'll also be sharing more about what we plan to do to help make a difference in the world around us. So watch this space. And the last thing I'll say in relation to PayPal is that it really plays into a wider and deeper fear that governments, the state, will eventually seek to sideline digital assets through the introduction of central bank digital currencies. And we recently held 2 key events on this inside the Elevate Network. You can find the replay if you're part of the supporter program, the financial reset event, the 3-hour event that we recently recorded. And we've just uploaded our latest Navigating Digital Assets course, which is now available for purchase. So if you're interested in taking those courses, if you purchase the course, you get access to both the 4-hour online course and the 3-hour financial reset event as a bonus that we hosted last month. So if you're interested in finding out about that and how we can mitigate against both the financial reset and how we can retain our sovereignty, in fact, in the face of things like central bank digital currencies, then please go to danastin-gregory.com/digital assets. Thanks for tuning in today. Once again, I'll be back tomorrow with a deep dive into everything that's going on with the COVID-19 inquiry. And on Wednesday night, we've got our all-network call inside our private community at weareelevate.org. Thanks again for tuning in. Please hit the share button. Together, we can reveal the truth. And thanks very much for being part of our audience here tonight in this live episode of the Elevate podcast.